Hey everyone, and welcome to WDIM News, my weekly podcast where I talk about sci-fi stuff and some other stuff. My name is Eric. Thank you very much for joining me today, where I will begin by discussing not just one, but both new episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks that were released this past week. If you follow my channel, you know that I'm a huge fan of the series, so I'm very excited to discuss these two new entries today. After that, I want to talk about the brand new trailer for the upcoming Apple TV series, Monarch: Legacy of Monsters, which is the next entry in the Godzilla/King Kong MonsterVerse franchise. And then I will end with an update concerning the ongoing writers and actors strike in Hollywood and how it has taken a very interesting turn. Then I will end with a new segment where I discuss some of the other things that I've recently watched, read, or played. But before I get into all that, I would like to thank you once again for clicking on this video and ask that you hit the like button to help support my small channel and the work that I do. Also, don't forget to subscribe for future videos. Alright, so let's talk about those Star Trek Lower Decks episodes. Season 4 is upon us. I really like both episodes. I didn't think either of them was like the best episode of Lower Decks ever, but I did like them. The thing I like the most about them is that, for one, just watching them reminded me of how great it is to have Lower Decks, and I'm just so glad that it exists. You know, it's very different from anything else that's Star Trek, including Prodigy, which is also an animated series. But the characters and the storylines from Lower Decks can step into the same world as these other series and just provide a different take on it. You know, we really saw that in the Strange New Worlds episode where Boimler and Mariner crossed over into that series, and how that episode almost was like a Lower Decks episode because those characters were involved. So I just really enjoy how this show is just its own thing. And even just 4 seasons in, it really has established itself as what it is. It's just its own little corner of the Star Trek universe, and it's just so different from anything else. It's something that I think a franchise like Star Wars doesn't have. They have animated stuff, but it feels like their animated stuff is just the animated version of their live action stuff. And we just got that with Ahsoka, where now they've taken one of their animated series, Rebels, and made it into live action. It just seems like the same thing. And I guess I kind of feel like that with Prodigy too. Like Prodigy is just trying to be an animated version of a live action Star Trek series. And maybe that's why I don't like it as much. But Lower Decks is definitely its own thing. Like, you couldn't do the things that they do on Lower Decks. They'd be really gross, I think, if you saw them in live action, for one thing. And the first episode this season is a perfect example of that, because Lower Decks takes one of the grimmest episodes of Voyager ever and made it into a farcical comedy, you know, and even makes the solution much more palatable, you know, by having this crazy situation where first we get 2 characters that are spliced, just like in the Voyager episode, but then it just gets ridiculous. Like, every character gets spliced with another one, and then they all get spliced into this like one big blob, and the crew knows they can't let this thing continue to exist, so they have to separate everybody again. I thought that was just great, and again, it's just something that only Lower Decks can do, and they pull it off really well, and I just love that. I love that they have their own corner of the Star Trek universe. I also think the addition of the new character T'Lyn is a welcome one. You know, I didn't think about this at first, but while I was writing the script out, I remembered, you know, Worf joined Deep Space Nine in Season 4. Seven joined Voyager in Season 4. So now we have T'Lyn joining Lower Decks in Season 4. I think it's really cool. I think it's like its own Easter egg, you know, that they've added this character in the same time that DS9 and Voyager added, you know, their new characters. And I like T'Lyn because she's so different than any of the other Lower Decks characters. Of course, she's a Vulcan. Mike McMahon, though, described her as the Vulcan version of Beckett Mariner, whatever that means. So far, she just looks like your standard kind of Vulcan. Maybe a little bit of Spock in her, where she has some almost emotions when, you know, she's working with Tendi and stuff like that. But I really dig the character, and I've mentioned before how I'm rooting for the character because it's based off a writer who directed the first episode that the character appeared in, which was the episode Wage Douge. And I love that the writer actually cosplayed as the character for years before she was added to Lower Decks. And I just think that's awesome. So I'm rooting for the character. You know, she's very different, again, from the other Lower Deckers. So I'm a fan of T'Lyn already. I also like that the characters are being developed over the seasons, and now we see they're being promoted. I think the show and the plot lines would get stale if they were ensigns for 7 seasons. Sorry, Harry Kim. But I do think that it's great that we're seeing They're still themselves, but we do see that they are growing a little bit. Boimler seems to go back and forth on how confident he is in his abilities. Mariner seems to go back and forth on whether she wants to be promoted or not. But these are real issues. I mean, human beings do things like that. We're not perfect. We're not Data. We have doubts. We have conflicting emotions, so one day you feel something, one day it's not a good idea. I get that. So it's not like these characters have to be on a determined path the whole time. I think that would be a lot more boring. The fact that they do flounder makes them more humanistic, and I really dig that. And I think it really comes through with their character development now, that it's believable that they're lieutenant junior grades. Well, I guess that happens all the way in the second episode, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But the fact that they are being promoted, it does make sense. It makes sense for the series. It still doesn't stop the fact that they are lower deckers. And I think Boimler says something about that in the second episode. It's good character development, and it makes the show more interesting. It makes the characters more interesting, and it makes me want to tune in every week. I also liked, and I kind of mentioned this in my Easter egg video about these episodes, which if you have not watched that, please watch that video. I released it last week and it hasn't got a ton of views, and I put a ton of work into it. My computer also freaked out when I tried to upload it, and it did that thing where I uploaded it to YouTube and there was no audio for some reason. So I had to redo that again. But anyway, I would really appreciate it if you could check out that video on my channel. It's only about 10 minutes long, and it is a good video. But anyway, in that video, I mentioned that I really thought the reason that the writers on Lower Decks started the fourth season with an episode about Voyager was because we had the third season of Picard, and that was all about the Next Generation, and to a certain extent, Deep Space Nine. And then we have the show Strange New Worlds, and that is always bumping up against the original series and always referencing that series. So I think that Mike McMahon decided to do a Voyager episode because there are a lot of fans of Voyager out there, and they deserve a love letter to that series as well. So I think that this was Mike McMahon kind of saying, hey, Voyager fans, here's a love letter to you guys. And that's why we had so many, deep cut Voyager references. I loved it. I only wish they could get the original voice actors back for all the characters that showed up. But I did like it. I liked the little comments that the characters made. Michael Sullivan missing his wife. I thought that was really funny. And then the episode ends with a mysterious villain ship, whatever you want to call it, destroying a Klingon ship. And I did mention in my breakdown of the episode that this was the same Klingon ship that was in the Wage Juge episode that introduced the audience to T'Lyn. If you don't remember that episode of Lower Decks, it was showing us like lower deckers from other alien federations, I guess you could say. So we saw the Klingons, we saw the Vulcans. I think we saw a couple others too. I can't remember. So who is this new villain? I really think that it is an evolution of Badgie. Season 3 ended with some mysterious entity scooping up the remains of Badgie after the fight, the big fight with all the California class and the Texas class ships. And I think it won't just be Badgie, but it will be the other AI characters that we've seen during the first 3 seasons of Lower Decks. We have Agamus, that was the character that was voiced by Jeffrey Combs. We have Peanut Hamper, that was the exocomp that Tendi fixed or became friends with. And then we had that weird episode with her last season. So I think that whatever this thing is, it may be the evolution of all those characters, and maybe a little bit of V'ger in there too. I could totally see Mike McMahon going back to the original motion picture and somehow integrating the character V'ger into his, series Lower Decks. It kind of looks like an upside down Starfleet Delta too. I know it doesn't look exactly like a Starfleet Delta, but it is a little bit like that, like an upside down Delta. So I think that this is some kind of AI that's an evolution of all these different AIs melded together. It's actually kind of smart if that's what it is, because that tells me that Mike McMahon and the writers on Lower Decks may have seen how AI would affect their craft and create a storyline about it that's 3-4 seasons in the making. We're doing this writers and actors strike right now, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But a lot of that strike has to do with the effects of AI on writers and actors. And here we have a villain that may be just AI, which right now AI is kind of the villain of all the writers and actors in Hollywood right now. So I think that's very meta. I think that's very Mike McMahon, and it's just another great part of Lower Decks. So I really liked the first episode. I don't know. I probably maybe liked the first one a little bit more than the second one. Maybe it was just because I was so excited to get back into Lower Decks. And of course, we had all the great Voyager references as well. So I probably like the first one a little bit more than the second one, but I do like both episodes. So now let's talk about the second episode of Lower Decks in the fourth season, I Have No Bones, Yet I Must Flee. The episode begins with the Romulans being destroyed, similar to how the Klingons were destroyed at the end of the last one. The fact that the Romulans and the Klingons were the first two federations, or whatever you want to call it, attacked, it makes me think that the villain is targeting Starfleet's enemies from the TOS era. I know there's only two, so this is kind of hard to make, an assumption on just 2 points of data. But the fact that they do start with Klingons and Romulans, it's kind of weird. It kind of makes me think like maybe this is a TOS era style villain. That also could mean that V'ger is somehow involved, and it's not going to be, anything from the Borg or anything TNG on. It's just going to be something referencing the TOS era and how somehow the Lower Decks crew is now going to be affected by it. Because we already had 2 characters from Lower Decks go back to Strange New Worlds, which was basically the same era, just a little bit before. So now maybe this villain will somehow tie into that as well. Maybe they did something, Boimler and Mariner, when they went back to Strange New Worlds that caused this character. I could totally see Mike McMahon doing something like that, and that would also tie it into that era of Star Trek. So this villain is getting pretty interesting, and hopefully we have little crumbs every episode. This episode obviously had less Easter eggs than the first episode, but I feel like these Easter eggs hit harder. I feel like I laughed more in this episode than the first episode. Maybe I like this episode more. I don't know. Now I'm even contradicting myself, but I don't know. I feel like some of the Easter eggs in this episode, I just laughed my butt off, especially when Shax and Ransom did the workout in the same attire as Crusher and Troy did, and they were doing the same exercise. I just thought that was so funny, and how Shax is just ready to pass out and Ransom's really pushing him. I thought that was cool. I thought, later in the episode, we had the callback to Spock's red shades from the Medusa episode. And then before the episode was over, we had Wesley's project from the Naked Now. They also gave a name to the Tucker tubes. That was something that I thought was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty funny how the Tucker tubes were the 2 tubes that were lit up. And then as soon as there were 3 tubes, it was called something else, but the things were named after Trip Tucker. Why wouldn't you name something with 3 things after somebody named Trip? I don't know. But I just stuff like that. I just was laughing, I think, a little bit more in the second episode because of how the Easter eggs hit. And I also thought it was really funny how the episode subverts the audience's expectations by first starting it like Rutherford is the only lower decker not to get a promotion, but then we find out that he has actually turned down multiple offers already. And it makes me want to know more about Rutherford, especially after last season. And we find out he had the secret past, and that Admiral Buenamigo created this whole AI system based off his designs and stuff like that. I really want to know more about Rutherford and what's going on with him. And it seems like they're going to do something special with him, because in the past, he's always been paired up with Tendi, and Boimler has been paired up with Mariner. But now it seems like Tendi is paired off with T'Lyn. So what's going to happen with Rutherford if he doesn't have Tendi to kind of do stuff with? Maybe they're going to go off on a side quest with him, and he might have some connection to the villain that we've been seeing in the first 2 episodes. I definitely think there's more going on with Rutherford, and I can't wait to see what it is. I also have a note here that Lower Decks created another cute thing that is very deadly. Moopsie, that thing, whatever it's supposed to be, that drinks bones. I mean, that's one of the things I'm talking about with this episode. There's these silly moments that, I don't know, it just really cracked me up. So yeah, maybe I like this episode maybe a little more than the first one, but I definitely liked him first. But yeah, Moopsie was definitely funny, but it reminded me of, Peanut Hamper, like I mentioned before, and Tendi's dog from the first season. Remember, she had made that dog that was also had bats that were coming out of its mouth and all crazy. So I think that every year Lower Decks seems to create something cute that is just deadly and destructive. I guess you could say Badgie's a little bit like that too. He was based off that Windows thing, Clippy, and then he turned into a homicidal AI. So that's something that's very much in Lower Decks' wheelhouse. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Moopsie fans out there. Somebody already is making a Moopsie doll somewhere. I know that. And that's definitely going to make someone a lot of money. So good idea making the Moopsie. It reminded me of a Pokemon. I'm not really a Pokemon guy, But I was like, is that a Pokemon reference? I don't know. Maybe if you guys know about Pokemon, let me know in the comments. Is that a Pokemon reference? That's kind of what I thought, having no frame of reference, knowing nothing about Pokemon. It's just the first thing that poked into my mind, I guess you could say. Poked, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, what else can I say about this episode? I also think that they may be creating a plot line or storyline where Ransom and Mariner will become a couple. In the first season, it seemed like it was heading that way. Ransom and Mariner are always butting heads. And with those kind of personalities, you know that they're going to end up together. They're just very alpha. Of course, they're going to hate each other at first, but then they're going to find they have a lot of commonalities. And I could definitely see those two characters getting together. And it will be very weird, not only because Mariner serves under Ransom, but Mariner's mother is Ransom's boss. Mariner's mother is Captain Freeman. So that will be an interesting dynamic as well. I definitely think that is going there this season. And I think maybe it could happen this season. I know that last season, Mariner was in a relationship with an Andorian woman. But for one, she has mentioned that the character is bi, so she can have guy dates or girl dates. And two, it didn't seem like that relationship was very serious. So that leaves the door open for Mariner to now have a relationship with someone else. And I think it would be funny for it to be Commander Ransom. I think Jerry O'Connell does a great job with that character. He probably doesn't get enough screen time as Commander Ransom. He does a lot of good for Star Trek 2. He also did the Star Trek Day this last week. I'm not even going to talk about that. I think that was pretty sad. I mean, I've seen other Star Trek days before, and this one by far was like 1/8 of what we get on a Star Trek day. Nothing was announced, no real new trailers or anything, so I didn't think that there was really anything worth talking about. But having said that, Jerry O'Connell was at the lead of that, so he's obviously very important to the Star Trek family. So I would like to see more of Commander Ransom, and if he's in a relationship with Mariner, I bet we'll see a lot more of him. And then finally, I really enjoy how the characters are developing. I guess I mentioned that already in my intro for these episodes, but it just feels so natural. At the end of the episode, we see that Rutherford is finally going to get promoted, just like the other ones, and they're all moving into this new phase of their careers together. Everything just feels really natural. It doesn't feel forced. They were able to create some interesting storylines to get them here without just everybody getting it at the same time. Boimler had his thing going on. Mariner had her thing going on. Tendi now has T'Lyn to worry about. And Rutherford, of course, was one of the focuses of this episode. So I think it was really good writing. We don't always see that everywhere, And I think that this was really good writing, and it makes the characters very interesting and fun to follow. I'm going to talk about the Ahsoka series in a little bit just because I'm still watching that. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. This show has something that show is lacking very much, which are interesting characters that are fun, characters that you don't just look at and feel words. I noticed in this last episode of Ahsoka that everybody's standing with their arms crossed all the time, like they're at a PTO meeting or something like that, and they're talking about their kid. And that's what I feel like when I watch that series. And when you watch somebody, even if they're not talking, if they're in the background and they look like that, it's why am I watching this show? And Lower Decks is just so fun. Everybody is doing crazy stuff, and I just love it. I love that the series exists, and I hope that it gets more popular. I hope that more people watch Lower Decks, and we get a lot more seasons of it. But let me know in the comments, what did you think of the first 2 episodes of Lower Decks in the 4th season? Are you fanboying like me? Did you not like them? Did you think they were silly? I would also love to know what theories you have about what this new villain could be. I do think it's somehow tied into AI and Badgie, but it could be something else. But yeah, let me know. What do you think that could be? And what do you think of the start of the 4th season of Lower Decks? So now let's talk about some other stuff. And one thing that I'm also excited for is the new series that will be released on Apple TV. Still in late 2023. A lot of people think that this is going to get moved because of the strike, but as of right now, it's still scheduled to be released in 2023, and that is Monarch: Legacy of Monsters. Now, this will be a series, not a film. It's going to be 10 episodes, and this will be the 6th installment in the MonsterVerse series that includes King Kong and Godzilla. They both have their own movies, and then they did a Godzilla versus King Kong movie last year or the year before. I'm not 100% sure. And there's also going to be a sequel to the Godzilla and King Kong movie that's coming out in 2024. So this series is coming out before that, and I'm not sure what time period this takes place in, because it definitely takes place in 2 time periods, and I'm going to talk about all that. But I'm not sure if this takes place before Godzilla vs. Kong. I know it happens after the first Godzilla movie. Like I said, this will take place in 2 time periods and follow a character that is played by both Kurt Russell and his son, Wyatt Russell. I think that is so interesting that Kurt Russell will be playing kind of a modern day version of the character, and Wyatt Russell will be playing the same character in the past. And I believe the past will be sometime in the 70s or early 80s. Wyatt Russell played the new Captain America in that MCU series that kind of went crazy. And I thought he did a great job. I also liked him in an episode of Black Mirror. That's one of their better episodes. I love that, that he's doing this with his father. Hey, maybe this means that we could see an older Brad Boimler one day played by Dennis Quaid, because Dennis Quaid is Jack Quaid's father. How cool would that be to see an older Brad Boimler played by Dennis Quaid? But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to Monarch Legacy of Monsters. The new trailer shows events from both time periods, including the attack on San Francisco from the first Godzilla film. John Goodman will also be returning after appearing in the MonsterVerse film Kong Skull Island. Now, spoilers here if you haven't seen that film, but John Goodman's character dies in that film. But during that film, they're also trying to create their own film. They're trying to document what's going on. And I'm thinking that in the trailer, we see little clips of John Goodman talking to the camera. I think that this series is going to be about them finding that film and what Monarch did after the events of Kong Skull Island. And while most of the movies tend to focus on the monsters, Godzilla movies are about Godzilla, Kong movies are about Kong, this series is going to be more about Monarch, which is the company that is in all these movies and kind of tries to help, I guess, humanity by not allowing these monsters to destroy it. I mean, it's kind of not consistent throughout the movies, what's going on with Monarch. I feel like at first they were going to be the bad guys, and then they kind of made them the good guys, and now it's kind of ambiguous. So I don't know where Monarch is, and maybe that's why this series will be interesting. But we're going to learn more about Monarch and how it affected these events that happened in Kong Skull Island and in the Godzilla film. That's why I don't know if the events from Godzilla versus Kong will be referenced in the series. I tend to believe that the series takes place before that movie, but I'm not 100% sure. And again, this will be separate from the Godzilla versus Kong sequel set to release in 2024, which is another reason why I think this series happens before Godzilla versus Kong, because the sequel will be coming out after that, and they don't want to step on canon or, contradict themselves or whatever because of the timeline of events. So I think this is going to be a really good series. I mean, Kurt Russell, John Goodman, those are 2 really good actors to be in an Apple TV series. Apple TV has had some really big hits this last year, and it looks like they are pumping in a lot of money to this series. The trailer showed almost a half body shot of Godzilla. That costs a lot of money to put Godzilla in a series. So I will put a link to the trailer in the description below if you want to check it out. But yeah, check it out and let me know. Are you a fan of these movies? Are you a fan of the MonsterVerse series? Have you watched them? I am. I like seeing big monsters fight big monsters. I'm not complicated. I think that Pacific Rim is one of my favorite movies because it's just a movie about big monsters fighting big robots. It's not really anything else, and I love that. So I really like this MonsterVerse stuff too. I think, the human characters basically mean nothing. And I'm fine with that. That's usually gives me a chance to check my phone or something whenever they're talking about the human characters. Because, they're very dispensable. I've said before on how the only actor that's ever pulled off any good scenes in any of these movies is Bryan Cranston. And, of course, it's because he's Bryan Cranston. But let me know, what do you think of the MonsterVerse? Will you be watching Monarch Legacy of Monsters? And are you excited for this new series? So now I wanted to give you an update on the writer's strike. Now, this one is really interesting. Usually I'm all doom and gloom when I talk about the writer's strike, but this new news could actually be a glimmer of hope. So let me go through it right now with you. The WGA, the Writers Guild of America, could strike a deal with individual studios instead of the entire group of studios. Now, this story came to me from the website Variety, but it was everywhere, and it was because the WGA released a statement. One executive said they had reviewed our proposals, and though they did not commit to any specific deal, said our proposals would not affect their company's bottom line and that they recognize they must give more than usual to settle this negotiation. So what really is going on here is that it looks like instead of the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild having to make a deal with all the studios, they may be able to make a deal with individual studios and start production on shows. This is a big turning point because before now, it kind of seemed like a lot of stuff was going in the producer's way. You know, they knew the strike was coming, so they were able to backlog all this content, and they're going to be able to release movies and yada, yada, yada. And now the writers are going to go broke because they have no work and they're going to starve. But it doesn't look like it is actually going that way for the studios. The Writers Guild has seen a lot of support from the community. I know they've been a lot of donations, and they're not as bad off as I think the studios thought they were going to be. The studios, however, I think have been losing a lot more money than they expected to by the actors not being able to promote new projects. And I believe that they are now thinking that we really have to get back to the table because we're just losing too much money. I mean, Warner Brothers stated last week that this strike has cost them over $500 million already this year. That's just this year, you know, and that is crazy. And many studios have already begun suspending development deals with big-time creators like J.J. Abrams. He lost a deal that he had, I believe, with Warner Brothers. The tide is kind of turning back from the producers towards the writers and the actors. And this could be very good news because the demands of the writers and the actors haven't changed. And it seems like they can be done. And now we have this new wrinkle with the company AMC. AMC, of course, has a streaming service. They have a channel, and they have The Walking Dead. That is their most popular franchise on their platform. Well, they have been granted waivers to commence production on several Walking Dead spinoffs because the AMC is not a part of this producers group. So the writers and the actors are saying, if you studios break apart and want to make individual deals, we're willing to do that. That is a huge advancement in these talks because, like I said, it gives the writers and actors way more power in their negotiations. And the studios are in a lot of trouble, it seems, because even movies that were a success, like Barbie, for instance, would have even made more money had the strike not been going on and that actors could promote the film. That was one of the things that people said, the fact that the stars of Barbie could not promote Barbie. Even though it was a huge success, it would have been even bigger because you could have had all those actors out there promoting it. So this is a very interesting development. I don't know what it's going to lead to. I have been saying for a long time that I think a deal will be struck before the holiday season because the studios do not want to continue to lose money into the holiday season because that is another big time for movies. A lot of people go out and spend money, not just at the movies, but, you know, there's a holiday season for gifts and stuff like that. So if people aren't talking about movies, if they don't care about new TV shows, they're not going to be buying stuff revolving around those things, and you're going to see losses everywhere that you can count. So I really do think that the studios are going to make a deal here before the holiday season, probably before Thanksgiving. That was always my guess. And we'll see if that comes true. But developments like this do seem to kind of irk that way that we are getting closer to a deal. Let me know, what do you think of this news? Do you think that we are going to get an end to the strike anytime soon? Do you think that I'm correct and that money talks and that we are going to get a deal before the holiday season because the studios don't want to lose any more money? Let me know what you think of this development in the comments below. And now I'm going to do this new segment I thought about, which is what did I watch last week? You know, what did I play last week? What did I read last week? First, I want to start out by saying I did not play Starfield or have a live stream because of issues with a new graphics card. I installed a new graphics card and the thing didn't work, and I've been going back and forth with the company and they won't let me return it, and they're trying to get me to get it to work, and they want me to buy a new power cord and stuff like that. And I'm just like, no, I want to return the graphics card and get one that will work. And I don't want to spend more money on one until you return this one. So I'm still working with them, and that's why I couldn't do the live stream. And I haven't even played Starfield yet. So I'm pretty bummed about that. I'm bummed, of course, about not being able to do the live stream as well. So once I get a new graphics card and I can get that going, I will definitely do that. I hope if you are playing Starfield that you enjoy it. I can't wait to play it. I was so hyped to play it. I watched all these videos about it. And then when I figured out that the new graphics card wasn't going to work, I stopped watching any Starfield videos because it's just too hard. I want to play the game and I can't because of the stupid graphics card. Right now, the video game that I'm playing mostly is Red Dead Redemption 2. I actually bought that game when it came out and lent it to a friend, but that was during COVID. I think I lent it to them like right at the beginning of COVID. And I was just like, oh yeah, I'll probably see you in a couple of weeks. I'll get it back then. Well, I did not see that person for like over a year, and I never got that game back. And I think I was like looking through something, I don't know, and I just realized I never played that game. Oh my God. So I had to buy it again, and I bought it again about 6 months ago. And I've been playing it a lot since then. I really like that game. I'm in my second playthrough right now. I'm trying to get 100% completion, and that is pretty tedious, let me tell you. But it's a fun game. If you've never played Red Dead Redemption 2, I definitely recommend it. It's a good way to waste a lot of hours. It's probably my favorite Western ever. It's maybe in my top 10 favorite games ever. Probably not my top 5. I did like Red Dead Redemption 1 a lot. I played that game a lot too. And I hear that they may be announcing a third game pretty soon. So I will be looking forward to that. It sounds like it's going to be a prequel, and it's going to show more of Arthur Morgan's life. And that could be interesting because I do find that character more interesting than John Marston, the protagonist from the first game. But yeah, that's what I've been playing. I also watched the 4th episode of Ahsoka. Like I mentioned before, this show still bores the crap out of me. A lot of reviewers I've noticed have said a lot of things that I've said about Ahsoka. And some of them like turned in this episode and were like, no, this is the first good episode of Ahsoka. I didn't think that. I mean, there were, I think, 2 lightsaber battles, and they were pretty cool. I do think that Ray Stevenson's character and his Padawan, or whatever that character is, I don't know, maybe they're not considered a Padawan because they're not Jedi. I think that they are by far the most interesting characters on this series. I think that all the characters from Rebels are not interesting. I think maybe the creators of Ahsoka just feel like the people that watch Ahsoka have already fallen in love with these characters from Rebels. People like me that didn't watch Rebels have not fallen in love with these characters. And I just think they're really boring, and I'm still not a fan of Ahsoka. I finished the Justified revival series Primeval last week, or the week before actually. No spoilers, but the last 15 minutes of the season were the only time I actually felt like that season was a season of Justified. If you're a fan of that series, I would still recommend watching Primeval, but to me, it just felt like Raylan Givens is guest starring on someone else's show. That would be my non-spoiler review of City Primeval, that it's just not, it just doesn't feel like Justified. Even the things that Raylan Givens does, it feels just really disconnected. But the final episode, there's something that happens in the last 15 minutes that really makes it feel like Justified again. And you're like, oh my God, this is what I want. Why is it ending? I want more of this. So if you have watched the series, you know exactly what I'm talking about, so don't spoil it in the comments. But if you haven't watched it yet and you are a fan of Justified, definitely watch City Primeval. The villain is okay. A lot of people are saying, oh, we don't need Boyd Crowder. This new guy is so good. He's not as good as Boyd Crowder. I mean, Boyd Crowder is like one of the most interesting, enigmatic characters that have ever been created on television. So this new guy is not Boyd Crowder. And the way he goes out, again, no spoilers, I just didn't like it. I was like, what? Like, really? That's how we're going to do this? And again, if you've seen the series, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So long story short, did I like the series? No. But would I recommend it to a fan of Justified? Yes, because I think you have to watch it, especially for that final episode. But I also, looking into this series and listening to actors do interviews or whatever, they did an interview with the star of Justified, Timothy Olyphant, earlier, and he told this really interesting story about how his portrayal of Raylan Givens is basically him just doing an impersonation of Sam Elliott in every movie he's in. And once he said that, I was like, oh my God, I can totally see that. Like, Timothy Olyphant is just doing a character that Sam Elliott has done in other stories, and he has applied it to Raylan Givens. And why this is even funnier is because in the last season of Justified, Sam Elliott is a villain. He's like one of the main villains, and he's in most of the season. And when Timothy Olyphant heard about this, according to him, he got super scared and thought that people were going to figure it out. Like, once Sam Elliott and him were in the same scene, they're going to be like, oh, he's just doing an impersonation of Sam Elliott. So Timothy Olyphant went to like the creator or one of the head people at Justified and basically just told them the truth about this. So the way they went around this was that they made sure that Sam Elliott's character didn't have a mustache on Justified. And that way fans wouldn't be as familiar with Sam Elliott and the characters that he's played. because of that big change. And I just thought that was so interesting. Like that's how that came about, was that it was because the actor was doing an impersonation of another actor, and then that actor actually got cast on the series, so they had to do something to make it so the audience didn't pick up on it. I really thought that was interesting, so I just thought I would share it. But yeah, if you're a fan of Justified, I would say don't expect a lot from City Primeval, but definitely I would watch it, especially for that last episode. And this last week, I revisited the Mortal Kombat film that came out a couple years ago. I think I saw somewhere somebody bashing it, so I was like, really? Was it that bad? I don't remember it being that bad. I still like it. You know, the review that I watched of that film was bad because they said it's a Mortal Kombat movie and they don't do a tournament. And every Mortal Kombat game is about a tournament. So how could you have a film about Mortal Kombat and not do a tournament? I think it's actually smart the way they did that film, and to not have a tournament and had all the characters face off against each other in like tournament style settings. Like they're all going to different locations and they're all one-on-one for the most part. I thought that was very smart. So I don't think that is a deficiency for this movie. I think that's something I actually like. They were filming the sequel. I don't know if they finished filming before the strike happened, but I am excited to see that sequel. They said that Carl Urban will be playing Johnny Cage. I'm a huge fan of Carl Urban. I don't know about that casting. Like, I can think of 5 other characters from Mortal Kombat that I think Carl Urban could play better than Johnny Cage. I don't understand why they didn't just get Jean-Claude Van Damme. You know, Johnny Cage was based on Jean-Claude Van Damme. Just get Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's still out there, you know, but I guess they wanted somebody younger. But I'll still watch the sequel. I thought the first Mortal Kombat was pretty good, and I do like those games as well. Well, that is all I have this time, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Thank you very much for joining me today. Please do not forget to hit the like button before you go, and I'll see you next time on What Did I Miss?